it's this last minute cosmetics, right? We're like, okay, hat forward or backward. Yeah. All right. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Waking the People with your host, Sir Chad Everett Rocheers, and the man that even Prince would sing about, that dastardly good looking Joshua, the Kraken, the Patriot. I think we could probably fit a bunch of little like catchphrases on there. McClendon.
I know
maybe that one actually is the middle one.
It's expanded. Welcome back, guys, to the episode. It's been a minute, y'all. Chad and I want to start this episode with just saying that we apologize for our schedules being so wild. I saw that Chad did an episode last week with a military medic. That was really cool. So we're trying to get some stuff out there, but Chad and I's schedule right now are just completely off the wall. Like, this is my only day off. My only days off, I have Sundays. So we tried to get an episode in. Chad's got all kinds of stuff that he's doing. He's all over the place. So welcome back. If you have not subscribed yet, please do so. We're going to try to get back on track here and get some more videos out once our schedules kind of calm down and we can mesh them a little bit. But nonetheless, doesn't mean that the world has not just kept on turning, and there's plenty of stuff to talk about. So happy to be back. Missed you guys. And yeah, hopefully we can get a little more regular Chad like we were when we had plenty of time on our hands.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it was nice to be able to knock 2 episodes out a week. You know, hell, for everybody out there that actually follows our channel or even comes across the channel, first off, we're not saying we're right about everything that we talk about. We do a lot of research. We love what we're doing. And this is, instead of sitting back screaming at the TV going, that's a blatant lie, or these people are, gaslighting the shit out of everyone. We're like, you know what? Let's research it. Let's actually have a conversation and explore what the hell we're seeing and what actually is more likely happening or what is actually happening. And we try to keep the distinction between those two things pretty obvious. This is absolutely researched and this is more opinion driven based off of the facts that we have. So with that, we apologize. This is actually, for me, this is incredibly cathartic for me because I don't tune out through the week. No matter what, for the people out there, I'm a consultant and I own an electric vehicle charging systems sales and installation company. So it's an infrastructure based company. They're both in a kind of a young state, and they require a lot of attention, just like a baby requires attention. The companies do too. Josh was recently changed to a different job, and he submersed himself in learning everything he can to be successful with it and being a really good employee. So with that, he's got a lot of privileges that come with it, but he also has a lot of demand that comes with it. And the same for me. I just don't have the steady paycheck because both of my companies are mine. But point is, it's got us kind of bound up with our time. And it's, like I said earlier, this is very cathartic for me. It's almost like a therapy session in a sense, because I'm not leaving things bottled up. We're actually having conversations that are enlightening other people. Now, one thing you'll notice about Joshua and I is we don't throw down the podium position of authority where we're going to tell you, no, we are right. Everyone else is wrong. No, we want you to look into this stuff as well. And we'll give you the avenues that we typically use, so you don't get caught up in researching stuff in places that you're not likely going to find it. Google is horrible. Put that out there immediately. Use other search engines. Now, I know that one of our previous guests, she's not a fan of DuckDuckGo, but I do seem to find a little bit more non-biased stuff on DuckDuckGo than using Google. So if you are going to start researching this stuff, we'll tell you what avenues to use that we used to find these things so that you can look it up yourself. Don't take our word for it. Oh, I personally am one of the reading rainbow generation kids from way back in the day in the 80s, where that's all they'd tell you at the end of the episode. Don't take my word for it. Take a look. It's in a book. And then the more you know.
It's true. There's so much technology now with like the access to information is way outrunning our like society and people's ability to understand it. Like, so the vast amount of information that we have available to us now in this time in history is way more than ever before. So knowing what to trust, knowing what to believe, knowing what to take as truth and knowing what to take as opinion is extremely difficult now. And that's not our fault. It's actually, part of the reason why we started the show is because the people that are, delivering this information to society have a certain duty, in my opinion, to actually give, not opinion, but actually fact. And so we just started this show, just to try to at least, I always thought of it as like two people at a bar having a conversation about anything that they want, because now in today's society, you really can't have conversations about anything that you want. And the more I've been talking to people, and I've been kind of, through my own personal life journey, I've been exposed to a lot more different people. The more I'm seeing that not everyone, actually, a lot of people think like Chad and I do. It's just that the media and all the, the loud sayers, I guess you could say, are trying to drown out those that actually have the same idea, just to create more division is really what it's coming down to.
And if you guys aren't familiar with propaganda, a lot of people think that whatever they've learned in history is not likely occurring in their life because it seems surreal to them, right? It's like you learn about propaganda, you learn about like things that have happened in the history, and it's like, you know what, when it occurs to you, it doesn't align in the way you're experiencing it to the way you conceptualized it. So as like, one of the problems that people have when they're in the pursuit of success is it's hard for them to recognize when they hit their milestones for success, unless it's just like a hard number, right? Like $500,000 annually. Well, you can see that, but the rest of the factors around it, like what kind of house you'll have, what kind of car you'll drive, what would your life be like? Some people believe that once they reach a certain milestone in their life, that they're going to be happy or satisfied. Well, the ones that become incredibly successful are the ones that typically aren't satisfied when they hit those milestones, and they just keep pushing, almost as if it's like they're chasing this type of drug type experience where it's like, oh my God, it's supposed to be this way. Now, turn it from that, if you can conceptualize, or you've even had that experience yourself, and turn it over to the propaganda side of things. We've read about it. What happened in World War II? There was a significant amount of propaganda, but the way that it happened was they had the regular pressing, the regular prints, so the printing presses, they had them taken over so that they could actually start taking, printing out more and more material. So they had the trusted value from the previous, from that printing press. And all of a sudden the story started changing enough that people are like, oh my God. And the trust allowed that. It's called credulity. They were credulous to that information because they trusted the authority or the authors. Then it became, okay, well, now you have these issues. And this is what one of the things that Hitler did during World War II, to turn people against not just the Jewish people, but also against other countries. So what they did is took over the printing press. They started putting all this stuff out, and people were like, okay, well, they were surrounded by, they were inundated by this type of information. They heard it in conversations from their friends and townsfolk. They read about it. It was available. Now we have so much information at this moment that we have available, but the majority of what we have that we can consume is controlled by one particular political party, which we could refer to that as the state party at this point, is all three parts of government are controlled by this particular group. So they put all this information out. You feel well informed because you have so much information at your fingertips, more than you can actually consume. But if the majority of the information that you're exposed to happens to fall inside of that narrative, then you start to say, you know what, there can't be that many people in on this or that many people wrong. So it must be right. If you even have that moment of clarity, it's most of the time, it's just, okay, well, this is it, because they're half paying attention to it. And they're mostly, the other half of their attention is on their life or whatever it is they need to focus on. So this is how propaganda gets in and how it works against us. Propaganda is intended to gaslight you. It's not necessarily always to gaslight you against yourself and your own faculties. It's against the authorities that you've given credibility to prior to this point. They want to change your viewpoint so that you become their supporter. As I've mentioned before, one of the things that Hitler used to get the German people to turn against the Jewish people, there's a couple of major factors. Do you know what those were, Joshua?
Well, one was the loss of World War I, right? That was kind of his big thing. And
right.
The state of Germany's economy, I'm sure, was one of their, kind of a benefactor of the loss of World War I.
Yep. So one of the things about it after the loss of World War I, Hitler was not in power in World War I when they had lost. He came to power in World War II or before World War II.
Let me add something. He was a writer. He was a broke writer.
And an artist. A painter.
Nobody. He was a nobody. He went from a nobody, used this propaganda machine, and became the supreme chancellor of a country. So it just shows you, and I'm gonna let Chad finish his point, it just shows you the power of freaking propaganda and what it can do. It can take a broke artist and make him one of the most powerful person, if not in Europe at the time, definitely the most powerful person of a country like that.
And one of the most impactful people in history. Not to say positive, but his name is synonymous with evil. His name is used as a way to kind of give credibility to somebody else's mentality. And what I mean by that is not, again, not a positive way using credibility. It's to assign a particular nefarious thinking process to somebody else. Think about how many times people compared Trump to Hitler. You know, that was because they wanted to defame whatever Trump was doing by attaching him to this atrocity in history, by the propagator of that atrocity. So after World War I, Germany was put into a debt to pay back against the other countries that they fought against, that they lost against, and they had to pay this debt back. So from that, the people of Germany went into a depression, an economic depression. So actually, it was the same time that, you know, the United States was falling into it. Well, actually, I'm sorry, it wasn't. They fell into their depression, economic depression. And then there was all of these people that didn't have work. Their economy just crashed completely. So they would gather to listen to different politicians or speakers trying to become politicians so that they could try to get their elected position, so they could try to do something to make a difference for the country. So Hitler decided, he went up to the podium, and the first time his conversations and what his speech was a little flat, but it still did touch a few people. So the next time he went up to give his speech, he had several plants in the audience. So several people understood what he was going to talk about, and they started to cheer on at the right points in time. So it took people that were stuck in this place of indifference and frustration, and started to hear people around them cheering for these things. And it changed their emotional state enough that they started to follow what the speaker was saying, Hitler, and by the other people that were plants that were cheering on or booing or whatever at the right times in the conversation or in the speech, so that it got people to understand. It's kind of like a laugh track in an audience. It may not have been funny, but it was intended to be funny. So you hear a laugh track, and it's trying to provoke you into laughing. It's an emotional reaction to something that you're supposed to find funny. Same concept with this, but this was sadness, anger, hostility, frustration, and hope. Those are the things that they were using to try to get people out of it. First, he unified Germany, or he started unifying Germany just because of the state that Germany was in. He didn't immediately go after the Jewish people. He went after just trying to get the people to understand they were in a bad place and they could get out of it. And then he started more of his rhetoric. So one of the other things that he did, obviously, with his printing press, was to put information out to help people, you know, to educate people. He took over. He went after the smarter individuals. He went after people that stood against him, that actually could articulate their points against him, and silence them so that they could not speak out against him, and continue to hold a resistance for other people. So if their conversations died off, eventually the propaganda would start to sink in to the point it would win over those individuals that followed the defectors, if you will. They weren't really defectors. They were already against him before it started. It's a defector is after the point they leave it, right? So he removed the talking points against him and continued to inundate people with the same information. So then, by the country of Germany being in a depression, Jewish people have a very strong cultural connection with each other, predominantly, especially whenever you get into the areas they live in together. There's a lot of cultural bonding that takes place, more so than other cultures, not all other cultures, but other cultures, specifically in Germany. There were the people that were on the outside of the Jewish communities that were not doing business with each other and keeping the money flowing within each other. So they just kind of disappeared or dissolved over time. But with the Jewish communities, they did business with each other because they know, like, trust. They saw each other at the synagogues. They knew of each other, and they kept the money involved with each other. So it gave them a higher standard of living, even in a depression. And that was something that Hitler used against the Jewish people, is he said, look, they don't even share. They're not even with you in this. And it gave a point of contention that he could drive towards somewhere that helped strengthen the unification of Germany by making an enemy, even though the enemy was within. To them, not saying that they were the enemy, because I don't believe they were at all. But it made them into something that they could point their aggression towards. Then after that, they started giving health risk reasons to dislike them. Do you know what disease it was that the propaganda machine was spreading, that Jewish people supposedly spread to others?
Mm-mm.
Typhus.
Really?
Yep. Yep. So he was having them. So that was part of the health concerns, to make them out the Jewish people. So it got Germans, regular Germans, or non-Jewish Germans, not regular Germans. The Jewish people were also regular Germans. But the non-Jewish Germans, that was one of their reporting mechanisms. It was encouraging people to keep an eye on them, to report on them. And it created this hostility, this frustration, this anger towards these individuals. So before you know it, it dehumanized them, because it made the other people feel like they were victims. And the people that were the villains and making them into victims were the other people, which were the ones that had some financial stability. So they weren't mega wealthy. They were just more financially stable on average than the other non-Jewish Germans. And then they gave a health risk issue. Is this stuff starting to sound eerily similar?
Oh yeah, and even more, because he did get a lot of backing from the very wealthy people of Germany, because, you know, if you control the money, oh, it sounds a lot like we're doing now, Chad, actually, as you think about it. Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, all these mega billionaires are backing this movement. Sounds kind of familiar. Interesting. I wonder how that works out.
Yeah, right. So they also wanted to create camps because typhus was something they were trying to control from spreading. Because it made the Germans, the non-Jewish Germans, believe they were doing the right thing, because these people needed treatments and to stop them from spreading their disease to other people. That was the belief that propaganda pushed. So if you're not familiar with this, to jump off of that, and kind of, I think we can leave the subject for the time being, but if anybody has more interest in it, we could obviously go through more history. I'm not a historian. I have very deep interest in the way that we have existed as a species. And then what we have right now with this driving tribalism and the psychology behind it, very interesting to me. But are you familiar with shielding, Joshua?
As far as what, like a mechanism and conversation?
It's a protocol that the CDC is going to be using,
Okay.
or what they plan to use. And it's called shielding. And you can look this up. If you're listening to this, go to the CDC. They have modified it since the first time I found it, but it is on the CDC still currently to this day on September 26, 2021. If you go to the CDC, type in the search bar for the CDC, go to DuckDuckGo, you won't get the slanted bullshit, and you're going to go straight to the website, and it'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. Shielding is a plan for encampments. So like right now, what's going on in Australia is it's almost identical to what their plan for shielding is through the CDC, and the CDC for the United States, Center for Disease Control. Their plan is to create camps. Now, they wrote this plan in 2019. So keep in mind, now the first time I actually found this, it actually had a date for when they plan to implement this, which is in early 2021. I cannot find that date anymore, but it was there before. So with this thing is it's going to be taking high-risk people and those that are unwilling to take the vaccination. And it's a camp to put them in so they don't spread the virus. Yep, that's the CDC. Go to it. It's shielding. Read through it. It's not an incredibly long read, but you're going to hear it from the sales pitch side for the benefits and all of that, not the atrocity. Australia is currently doing this, where in Sydney, Australia, people are being taken from their homes if they have not yet been vaccinated, or if they have had actually come down with the cough, right? The couuf. If they've come down with it, they've been separated from their families and their homes. They've been put into these camps. One individual, by the way, this one individual, they were looking for him. They actually sent out there was a wanted notification for this person. It was a national, like they were trying to find this person because they were considering him to be like a super spreader, if you will. So they were looking for this guy. The reason why they were looking for him, Joshua, could you guess why they were looking for this guy?
I'm sure he has some kind of government affiliation.
Nope.
Influencer. No.
Nope. None of the above. He was in this. It was in an elevator by himself, and there's cameras all over these encampments. There was in this elevator. They caught him sneeze without covering his nose.
Oh God.
Yep. And then they said they could not find him afterwards. They couldn't find him on the campus or the encampment. They could not find him there. And because he didn't report and he wasn't, they couldn't find him. He was now a wanted person because he sneezed in the elevator by himself. Well, turns out he never left the encampment. He heard that they were looking for him later on after they'd been looking for him for several days. He found out about it and he turned himself in. He goes, I've been here the entire time. And they're trying to put charges on him because of him being out and not being didn't respond, blah, blah, blah. So when I say blah, 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 it's just a bunch of nonsense following that. So keep in mind, this is not scare tactics to go, hey, by the way, we're all going to die. Yeah, we're all going to die some way, somehow, at some point in time in our lives, right? But the point is, this is happening in Australia right now. Now, here we are, we're facing economic issues, significant economic issues, supply chain disruptions. We've got, oh my God, I'll keep that subject for a second. The one I just thought of, which has to do with immigrants and people that are refusing to take the vaccine in the country. So we have workforce issues. We have supply chain issues coming up. We've got people saying that they're not even going to, like, the fuel, we're going to have another fuel crisis because we don't have enough people driving.
I went to Wing House, Chad, last weekend. Everyone knows I'm a big football fan. Football's back. Wing House, when you look at the price of wings, it says market price now.
Treating it like grouper.
It won't even show you how much chicken wings are, Chad. That's what kind of supply chains we're running into.
Wow.
Chicken wings, market price.
Wow. That's insane.
That blew me away. This isn't grouper.
Yeah.
Chicken wings.
This isn't something that you pay market price because the price has to shift based off the ability to catch it. No. But all right. So I don't want to stay on too many subjects or one subject for too long, simply because we just don't have a whole lot of time. Joshua and I really had about 45 minutes to do this episode today. We still have almost 30 minutes left, so we have 25 minutes. But we have a lot to talk about. And I wanted to at least touch on some of these subjects. Remember, again, look at Project Shielding. Early on, they called it Project Shielding. Just type up Shielding CDC. So, or CDC Shielding, whichever one.
Who put them in charge? CDC they're not like a government organ. Well, I guess they are, but they're the center of disease control. They shouldn't be making encampment ideas. You know what I mean?
They don't write laws. They're not allowed to write laws.
No.
They're non-elected officials. They're appointed officials. And they're not even, anyway, it's not as simple as you voted for these people.
Yeah, they have a job, you know.
We didn't vote for Fauci, but look at what's happened. We know now through emails and the paper chain of policies and grant monies distribution, things like that. We know for a fact that Fauci was directly involved in gain of function, and he lied to Congress, and they've done nothing about it. Nothing. He's not going to have anything done about it because 3 houses controlled by the same party, and he's the darling of the left. Fauci can do no wrong. That man stated that an attack on him is an attack on science. To me, if you have ever studied the scientific method, that statement would make you want to throw up in your, just throw up. And he is directly connected. This is not implicated in alleged. There is evidence that proves it. And he lied to Congress about it. And they've done nothing about that. They've put people in jail, in prison, actually, for lesser crimes. And this man, no consequences. He continues to go on. They called him one of the sexiest men alive or some stupid shit recently.
Fauci?
Yep. Yeah, he was up there.
What?
Disgusting. Disgusting. Because people, they're cult worshipers.
Jesus.
Why would you think that man's attractive? Aesthetically, he looks like Feifel gone west if he got recruited by the Nazis and became this little fucking, he was a brown shirt. No, not even a brown shirt. He was one of the, he was like, as if Fauci, or if Feifel gone west had to stand in front of the Nuremberg trials and defend his position on what he did to people.
He looks like that. He looks like the innkeeper from Lord of the Rings. and we're just top 5 sexiest men alive.
Yeah.
It's getting ridiculous. I didn't even know that. For real? Who voted on that?
Nobody votes on that shit. They just print what they want. It's like people, they use specific places as credibility. To me, like there's so many people that are in love, like they love a comfortable lie over an uncomfortable truth. And even when you present the uncomfortable truth, they fight for the lie that feels better. And what's really crazy about this is the lie that feels better makes it harder for them to live. But the truth is so uncomfortable cognitively. It's called cognitive dissonance. It is so incredibly uncomfortable, they'll avoid it at all costs, no matter how smart they are. This is a virus, if you will. It's a mental virus that will affect the smartest among us.
Yep.
By the way, the people that are most resistant to getting the vaccine, the number one group?
What?
PhDs.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Highest end education. They're the most resistant to getting the vaccine, and followed by people that have high school with some college.
Makes sense.
But as you go through it, associates, bachelors, and masters, you see they're higher on the rate of the level of the percentages of people that will get vaccinated, and the ones that are on the lower end of that are going to be PhDs followed by, So, but what do is they've made it that if you resist the vaccine, you are lower intelligence. It's a dehumanizing method. It's if they're not smart enough to make decisions for themselves, now they're more harmful because they're more likely to make decisions that affect a lot of other people, not just themselves. And that's the way the media has framed this. And that's part of the propaganda. We're no longer going to be a group of individuals that are identified based off of religious positioning. It's more about the positioning of political positioning.
Yep. They're becoming God in a way.
Yes. Well, that's what happens with the human species. What we do when we we get rid of a god. We get rid of one of the monotheistic gods or one of the polytheistic gods. We create another one. We are geared to this as a species because we're geared into hierarchy, and you need to have something at the highest end of the hierarchy. And it has to be something that actually could supersede any individual above you, because it's also a way you take down hierarchies, or you move. You don't really take down a hierarchy necessarily. I mean, you do when you want to get to another one. But what it does is it removes an individual that may be above you in the hierarchy. There's got to be one thing that can do it. So it's why Kim Jong-un is supposedly his own living deity. He's an infallible god to the North Koreans. And by that means that he can't be removed in his hierarchy. He's also supposed to be his father reincarnate. So there's a lot of things about like what happens whenever you go into the religious positioning. So as far as my position is, one of the groups of people that I detest the most are the atheists. Even though I be one and myself or something of that sense, I detest. Yeah, right. I think it's interesting because I'm more of a Jefferson Christian. I prefer the Christian belief system for society's organization. And I'm more for that by removing the supernatural of it and bringing it to the real things that we can completely do an experiment on, like a scientific approach to it. And that makes me more of a Jefferson Christian. I detest the atheists. So specifically the ones that have to create their own new God. And a lot of those, whatever the media tells them, they transition into that belief system. And they call themselves free thinkers. I'm like, you guys are not free thinkers. No, you are part of the biggest problem that we have living today. So, but they've created their own God, and Fauci's on the higher end of that hierarchy. So Biden's actually not as high on that hierarchy as Fauci is. Because a lot of people don't look at Biden as anything more than a Manchurian candidate. So if you're not familiar with what a Manchurian candidate is, look that up in the DuckDuckGo search. You can look it up in Google too. It'll give you it. There was a movie made by it. But what it is it's somebody that serves an interest of somebody else, specifically a foreign power or a foreign enemy. Now, and that's what a lot of people look at Biden as. That also says why he's so low in the approval rate. He is the lowest president in our lifetime in his approval rating.
How many times has he said, I'm not running the show?
I'm not
just
allowed.
blatantly. Like what?
Yeah.
What are you?
They
Who
cut
is?
his microphone off. Somebody cut the microphone of the most powerful person in the entire world. Somebody cut that person's microphone off. He has a handler. That man is not here. He is a puppet. That's a Manchurian.
He thinks it. I think Chad. He actually thinks that he is running the show. And this is something I want to talk about. I don't even think like Biden is an idiot, but I think Biden found himself in a very sad situation. Because honestly, like Biden's, when you know this too, he's more of a moderate. He's really not like far left. I just think that he was the one candidate that whoever's pulling the strings can have complete control over, and that's why they pushed him so hard. So I think he's over the hill as far as cognitive function and being able to actually execute his ideas. But they just said this guy is the most perfect guy we can control. We can put him out there with some note cards, and he'll say whatever we want us to say because he's almost over the hill. He's got, he's built his wealth up in a way where, obviously he's very, very wealthy. So it's sad. It kind of is sad. I think if we actually got some of Biden's ideas from him, it wouldn't be this bad. But we're getting all this crap that, he's kind of just a middleman. That's just like, hey, say this. And I don't know who's pulling the strings, Chad. I mean, I got an idea. But as far as who's actually pushing that stuff down his throat to say, and he's just kind of like being pulled in every direction. And it is what it is. We're just have to live through it. And it's only been it hasn't even been a year. It hasn't even been a year. Like this is going to be a long presidency.
We're only at 9 months. Oh, we're at 9 months and 5 days of his presidency, and life has already changed drastically. So, yeah. Hold on just a second. He's one of the authors of the 1994.
95?
No, 1994. Wait.
The crime bill?
Yeah.
Yeah, it may have been 94.
Yeah.
We made crack. Crack was a harsher sentence if you got caught with crack versus cocaine. They're the same thing because he knew that the predominant people that get caught with crack cocaine are African Americans.
Yep.
A lot of people don't know that.
Things like that. There's a lot of things that were introduced, but he was part of that. And if you go back to the late 70s, he also referred to mixing schools as his children potentially going to school in a jungle, referring to Black people being more crazy and more disruptive. So yeah, but to me, he's more of a Dixie Democrat anyway. By the way, if you're not familiar with this and you've heard about the big lie, and we're not talking about the voting big lie because that's obviously another subject, but there was supposedly the Republican Party was that of the anti-slavery party and that it was for freedom and all of this, and then it switched into being the racist party. The reality is that never happened. So the Republicans the Republican Party was not a party during the Civil War. It was something that was founded towards the end of the Civil War into the post-Civil War moment. And it was founded because it was people that were trying to fight for, they were more populists. They were more towards you get what you keep, whatever you create, you keep. They were for lower taxes. They were for more individual rights. But the Democrats were more for slavery, and they were for big government. They've been that way for a long time. All of the Confederacy, not as an absolute, but 90 something percent of the Confederacy was Democrats. Now, but supposedly the Democrat Party switched. The founding party of the KKK was Democrats. So they supported the KKK. Up until it became incredibly unfashionable to do it, then they went into silence about supporting them. So it's not the Republicans, but the Republicans have been painted to be those individuals. The Republicans have never been the big party. They're not the biggest party predominantly for all of the United States history. It's been the Democrats have predominantly been the biggest party. So with that, it's because now we got to the point where we have more two parties, but the Republican Party has almost always been the weaker of the two because of the fact that they don't want big government, which means it takes away some of their power. Where the Democrats want big government, which means there's more people interested in keeping their jobs and their careers longer than their normal terms, and it makes them want to stay longer. It's self-interests. They want to create the ruling class so that they have the elites and then they have the peasants. and they have it. Look at Obama's birthday. Look at every single get together that they do. Chicago had the big concert. Lori Lightfoot was out there. All these people were unmasked and all of that, but they demand that your children be masked at school. You know, they demand that you take a vaccine that they themselves also are exempt from.
Or that girl, that our favorite AOC in that dress, tax the rich, and she owes like $200,000 in taxes.
Yeah, she makes more money she's ever made in her life now, and she still won't pay the back taxes. She hasn't, as far as I know. She also went to this gala event, which did cost money, but they're like, oh, she didn't pay for it. When has she paid for anything for herself since she got elected?
True.
Who's paying for it? Somebody else. That's the way that they work.
Raise your hand, because it's all of us who are paying for it.
Yes.
That's what it is.
You know, and then there's like, she's just an absolute parody. Supposedly, she has a degree of economics. I'm like, that is a huge problem. And that college should never get anybody else to go there for economics ever again. Because if that's the thing, then they're fucking, please. I would never, not even one conversation would I take away something that I would say, that person knows their stuff. Because AOC is a representative of that college degree. She doesn't understand economics. She understands getting involved in self-interests. You know, like yesterday, well, not yesterday, a couple of days ago, they voted on whether or not they were going to continue funding to Israel's Iron Dome. By the way, if you're unfamiliar with Israel's Iron Dome, it's a defense system that they use. It is 100% defense. It is not to attack, it's to defend. So if let's say rockets were launched in, it happened within less than a month of Biden's presidency. Hamas, which is a radical Islamic group that uses a lot of Islamic territory as their means to try to create attacks, and they put their own citizens in the way so that whenever somebody engages back to fight with them, it increases the likelihood that there's going to be human casualties. And then their media, they know how to use the media against whoever they're fighting. Predominantly, they're fighting Israel. So, in the Israelis. So what happens, the Iron Dome it's a defense system that if a rocket or something is shot into or towards Israel, this Iron Dome operates and it will shoot down whatever's being fired. So Congress voted on this, whether or not to continue funding. AOC was going to vote no, and then she changed her vote to present, which just means she didn't vote yes or no. And as soon as the bill passed to continue funding Israel for their Iron Dome, so we continue to fund and get them, what they need in order to keep the Iron Dome intact, she starts crying as if it was an atrocity that Israel can still defend themselves, because she's trying to hold the position that she's all about the Palestinians. And that's who needs help. And the Palestinians are being oppressed, and the Iron Dome's attacking the Palestinians. That's absolute nonsense. Israel is a democracy in the Middle East. It's one of the few democracies, true democracies in the Middle East. There are Palestinians that live with the Israelis in peace and harmony. And there's other ones that don't, that live outside of the territory of Israel. So we're helping fund that so that they can continue to protect themselves. The bill passes so that we continue to fund them. And AOC turns to the bullshit that she also did on January 6th, where she was crying and acting like she was under attack and she was in fear for her life. She is an actress. She's trying to play the role of the actress. She's like the worst date you would ever have.
Oh God.
Where she's like the one that would make accusations about you that would put you in deep fear for your well-being.
Mm-hmm.
That would make those kind of accusations likely, because of the way she's doing this. She's also likely the person that would make some unbelievable allegations. Like, she never named nor pressed charges on the person she said sexually assaulted her. Never. She hasn't done it. But she said after she got ridicule and backlash from January 6th, where she was crying and saying that these Trump supporters were going to rush in and attack her, that it reminded her of an event that happened at another time in her life. So that she can get more of the sympathy notes. So I talked about this recently on my Facebook, and I apologize, Joshua, I know I'm dominating the hell out of this conversation, but I talked about this recently on my Facebook and other social medias about how people are taken advantage of. You know, an emotional mind dismisses rationality. Because the emotional mind says something else, and there's a sensation that goes with the emotion, because you're charged, physically reacting because your chemistry makes you do it. But a rational mind typically is lacking that particular physical expression. It's more of, well, this is just what's true, and there's a calmness to rationale. But if you can stay in a state of emotion, then you're more likely to be played emotionally. So what does it take to get people to that point? And it's something that I had to say, you know, like I mentioned that I had a hunch that I was going to hurt someone's feelings today. And it's likely every day I do that, but I don't do it intentionally. I do it just by being me because of their attachment to the way that I'm going to be as a person and whatever part of their life that I'm in, whether it's through just reading my posts or if it's interacting with me on a professional level or whatever it may be. But what it ends up turning into is he's right, but he hurt my feelings, so he's wrong. No, because that's what the irrational mind does, and the emotional mind is the irrational side. So it's just huge issues with that, because what do we hear? We constantly hear reasons to be emotionally excited from the media. And when you deal with the left, that's almost exclusively what they do. It's all about being outraged or upset or whatever. It's all about the emotion. And the right does not do that very well at all. Republicans are horrible at that. You know, because they just don't do it well. They don't even try. They continue to try to appeal to the rational side of the mind. Now, not as a whole, but majority of it, versus the other side, which is almost completely flipped. They very rarely try to appeal to the rational side. They use fear to try to convince people it's a rational conversation. So I've gone on and on and on about all of this. Joshua, what's some of your input? Because I know you got a subject we want to get to. And I've got an FDA subject that I need to get to as well before we finish up. So
all that was correct.
I mean, irrationality, right?
Right. I mean, it's true. You know, just to kind of top this thing off, the people that I talk to on a daily basis from all walks of life, the media is trying to make you think that everyone thinks this way. And it's really not the case. Most people are open-minded to what other people think. So they're trying to create this like false narrative, like this false sphere of society, that there are these people and there are these people and this is how it is, they're against one another. And that's, you know, it's not correct at all. And then, you know, to kind of transition, the media, for some reason, it's like there's so many things that are, I got to be careful how I word this. There's so many things out there that go on in the world. There's so many things that go on in the world that deserve attention as far as the media goes. And it's interesting how, you know, they like to pick and choose what things that they find valuable and that the world should know. So we're gonna transition, and by saying that, I don't mean that this topic is not important. I'm just trying to paint you a picture as far as what makes the news and what doesn't make the news. So I want to talk about the case that's coming up, or the ongoing investigation that the whole world has seen. Every news network has really been pumping it out. And that's the Gabby Petit case. I think I'm pronouncing her name right. Chad knows I am a horrible pronouncer. I just cannot pronounce things. I'm not very good at it. But the Gabby case, a lot of weird things about this case, Chad. I know that you've been following it a little bit, and I kind of dive in a little bit more, but a lot of weird things going on with this case. So let's kind of just give a quick overview. I'm sure most of y'all are aware of the case. So girl Gabby goes on a trip with her boyfriend at the time, fiance actually at the time, Brian. They go on like a camping trip in the van. They want to travel, you know, the country or this area and do some camping. So I guess I'm not really sure what's going on with their relationship. We've gotten a lot of stories about what was going on. She ends up missing, can't find her. He comes back, and then this whole thing has started. A lot of weird things, Chad. Let's start off with some of the things that kind of I've been puzzled about with this case. And one is that, so it took like 15 days for her to be pronounced missing, even though he came back September 1st. Her parents didn't report her missing until like September 11th. So it took 10 days after he was already back with their van, the van that she owned. It was her van. And it took that long for her parents to really say that she was missing. That was like, yeah, that way I was like, okay, It's very, very sad what happened to Gabby. But at the same time, that's a little fishy to me. And then it took 6 hours for him to be, pronounced missing. It was strange. It's like, something doesn't add up. There's all kinds of things in this case that just don't make sense to me, Chad, at all.
Yeah, and that's always seems to be the case, especially early on. It's when it comes to listening to the media, it's hard to understand what really happened because a lot of times they like to position things to make it more convoluted. Because the less you understand about something, but the more emotionally you feel like some degree of attachment, the more likely you are to continue to tune in. So what happens with that is stories get watered down or distorted to the point that you're like, I'm not really sure what the hell is going on. So like you're saying, it's really hard to tell because we're told one thing, which is likely what we got a lot of the information from is from the media, not from the actual detectives involved in the case, but what they may bring a detective on. But if you ever notice, whoever the host is that brings somebody on always handles the guest. The guest is not allowed to just speak freely. The host has got to wrangle them back in, talk over them, disrupt them, or can't just dismiss them. They never can say anything other than what is in the permissible area of acceptable language or conversations. And if you haven't noticed that yet, pay attention when you do watch the media or the news moving forward. And it doesn't matter what channel it's on. All of them do that. It's just the big ones are the ones that most people watch.
Yeah.
So it is strange. And what we look at is there's a deep psychology to be in abusive relationships. So as an example, I have an ex-girlfriend that is, and if you're familiar with psychology, she actually is, she's still alive, is a covert narcissist. And a covert narcissist is one that you don't ever really notice as a narcissist. That's why they call them covert narcissists. That's a slang term. It's not actually the definition in psychology, but it's the easy one for a lot of people. They usually position themselves as victims regularly. There's a payoff to a person that's always a victim, and that's usually sympathy. There's a degree of validation and some forms of credibility about who they are as a person because of what they project. My ex, which is many years ago, actually, she was a covert narcissist. I was the white knight in shining armor that came in and rescued her from a failing marriage that was from a detached, unemotional, unavailable, disruptive husband, that it was like, I just got what she told me, not really him, which means that he was also more defensive because he always felt like his character was being attacked. It's hard to tell what's true and what reality there because people have vested interests in not looking bad. So you'll have situations where people get themselves into or stay in abusive relationships because of the payoffs that they get out of it. Now, it's horrible what happens like with this type of situation. I'm not saying that's what happened in this situation, but I have noticed that a lot of people are reluctant to leave the person that's abusive towards them for a multitude of reasons. But if it was all purely measured that this is a negative and I need to get out because it's negative, that's not common because usually those people do just get out. Then you have the other people that get some sort of benefit out of it. Now, that benefit could just simply be he'll stop being mean one day and I'll save him. I'll change him or change her or whatever. My example was it was more of save her, right? And like help her, have the life that she says that she wants. Later, she turned me into the enemy as she recruited another guy into that conversation. So, and it just, this cycle continued. So what happened to her? We don't know. But it could be that she obviously played some role in her own demise. But again, I'm not trying to sound heartless. I'm just trying to say, like, on the big spectrum of responsibility, people fall on those spectrums always. It just sometimes you may have the smallest sense of responsibility. And it just so happens that, you were walking down that street that day. You chose to go down that street, but culpability and or responsibility for the negatives that happened to you, well, that may not be very high at all. It could just simply be you happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And then you have the other side, which is I purposely went across the street, punched that guy in the face, and then he stabbed me. Well, you got stabbed, so therefore you're a victim, right? It's all about the way that it gets spun out. Again, that's the problem with propaganda, as we opened with. Now we have propaganda now. It's just all about self-interest and narcissism. These news reporters don't give a damn about the truth. They care about who's going to watch them long term. If they cared about the truth, they'd be outing their own companies. Project Veritas, big shout out to them because they have people coming out against their company's interests for the truth, the honesty. So we have somebody like this. We have this girl that's gone missing, which now they found her body, right? And actually, it was somebody that was YouTube influencers or somebody like that that actually found her body. And as soon as her body was found, he turns up missing. The boyfriend.
Weird.
Yeah. Which is, I mean, it makes sense if he's, what it does is it implicates him in the crime because it looks like he's leaving because he's trying to save his own ass. Now, if you're familiar with the legal system in our country, it's not blind justice. Sometimes it's based off of whatever the community believes you to be. And then therefore, you're guilty because of it. So another thing that to look at is it's how everything seems to fit into a specific narrative. You know who Joy Reid is?
Mm-mm.
She's just a horrible she's a horrible commentator, incredibly racist person, but she's incredibly racist by the guise of, if this was a black person, then this wouldn't be happening, or people wouldn't care if this was a black person. That's racism. It sounds like she's coming from defending a population of people. The reality is all she's doing is stoking more racist issues. She's a Al Sharpton. And I think a lot of these people went to school from Al Sharpton to try to learn how to be race baiters. But so we don't know what's happened to this girl. Specifically, we know she died. We don't know the circumstances just yet of exactly how that happened, but the media is going to tell you whatever they want and try to get you to, continue to tune in. Boyfriend's missing. They're out trying to find him. As far as I know, he still haven't been found. Some crazy shit out there.
Yeah. I mean, not one picture of him, Chad. Not one picture. It's just weird. And I just want to make sure everyone knows that I'm not like on the side. I'm like, there's no sides on this. It's just a case that we're watching, right? I'm very sad what happened to Gabby. But there's a lot of, I like how you use responsibility. There's a lot of responsibility right now that I think in this case is not really being talked about. And that was, why did it take so long for her to be reported missing? And why did it take hours for him to be reported missing? Why is there's no pictures? Why is and I think this has been debunked, but I'm not quite ready to let go of it yet. I think there's a lot deeper stuff in this case. There was a couple, I don't know how to say it. I gotta make sure I say it right. There was a women couple, right? A lesbian couple that was in the same area that as these two individuals were, and they actually turned up both shot and killed around the same area. And the night they were killed, Brian and Gabby were actually at that bar, which is kind of, I found that kind of interesting. I was like, well, what are the odds of that happening? So I think there's a little bit more stuff going on. I think there's some deep stuff that hasn't really been talked about just yet as far as what actually occurred. I guess, man, it's an opinion, I'm thinking that there's some connection between Gabby and Brian and that couple. It's just my opinion. This is just what I'm watching. I think that Gabby was probably aware of what happened. And after a while, she really couldn't take it. And so Brian had to did what he did, again, just speculating. And part of me is not even sure if Brian ever came back either, Chad. I'm kind of skeptical. I don't know if he ever came back. But no picture of him, not one.
I mean, there's all kinds of possible speculation, right? I mean, they could all have just been, maybe they witnessed it and that person followed them and, separated the two. And, there's all kinds of possibilities with this. I don't know enough about it. I know enough about like what's going on and the way the media likes to do things. And they like to create things that aren't true as often as they can to make as much problem as they can make. So, yeah, I mean, it's strange. Like there's a lesbian couple that are murdered, right? Turns up shot and killed. And it could be that they were, involved, but that's just correlation. Mm-hmm. It's not causation necessarily. It's not fact. I mean, coincidences happen. People say there's no coincidences, but there are happenstances where, 4 people end up missing. 3 of them are found to be dead. Doesn't mean the other person isn't someplace, at the bottom of a ravine or someplace. We don't know. And again, I don't know enough about it. I do know that it has gotten some of my curiosity, but my other issues are more of like what's going on at their border, what is the, what is the president threatening us with next? That kind of stuff kind of like takes precedence for me, but it doesn't mean this isn't important. It just seems that, that's where I kind of put my attention. So I'm not as educated or informed as what happened to this couple. I've seen people on social media putting out their own views as well. It's just, the reality is we just don't know.
Mhm.
We have no idea just yet.
No clue.
Time will tell, but does it mean that time will tell the truth early on? It's also another thing.
Mhm.
Why didn't we get mass media coverage over the white couple that were kidnapped by five Black people, and they were horrifically raped, murdered, just the most worst things that could possibly happen, and they were alive for 3 days, tortured and tormented. And afterwards, the callous reactions of these individuals that did it, but the media won't talk about it. They're not putting it out there. What happened to these two? I'd have to get the names and all of that, but they came to mind, because the way the media works, it just doesn't matter. As long as it gets clicks, and this is the horrible downfall of the United States, whenever all we care about is whatever money we can make. Because if that's the case, China's got a hell of a lot of money. And if that's all you care about is how much money you can make, you'll bend your principles. So as far as that goes, there's just a lot to it. We'll keep keep everybody updated as this particular case kind of gives us more information. Josh, do you have anything else as far as the couple?
No, I guess we'll just see what happens. We're all bystanders, right? We got no clue what's going on. All speculation. Sad story. Unfortunately, sad. These kind of stories happen all the time, daily in your own community, all the time. The media just gets to pick and choose what they actually give the world. So just keep that in mind. There's, hundreds of kids, hundreds of thousands of kids that get, abducted to, sex slavery, and in your own community every day. We live in Florida. Florida is one of the biggest hotbeds for that. There's people that are murdered nonstop, and it doesn't get the coverage. So just kind of keep that in mind. I know that we're all, watching this case because it's getting a lot of media attention, but this kind of shit happens all the time, and doesn't make it a good thing. It's bad, and everything should deserve some kind of coverage. And the ultimate goal should be to try to fix certain things, not just portray them to the world. So,
and sadly, I think we're going to see a lot more of it, not less, with the way that we're being divided by our politicians and our political system. And just sad, but I think it's the sad truth. Last subject. This is going to be a really quick one. If you have not watched one of the most recent Project Veritas videos, there was another undercover that went out on a date, I guess, or they don't really specify if it's a date or not. The other person's behavior seems to kind of point that direction. This guy works for the FDA, and he's basically, what I got from it, it was painful to listen to the entire thing, because this guy mentioned using blow darts as a way of getting people vaccinated more times than I care to mention, like to the point of nauseum. Like, I was sitting there going, Jesus Christ, this is so much. Like, he says it so many damn times, but he does talk about other factors. And it's interesting how this is the mentality that's actually being bred into these individuals that are in these high offices or in these types of organizations. The FDA is a pretty big deal. And this guy is talking about using blow darts to vaccinate, Black people, because they are statistically much higher to be resistant to the vaccination for obvious reasons. Tuskegee experiment is a pretty damn good one, which had to do with syphilis, and how people were not given medical treatment. And later we found out about it. They were lied to. Well, there's a lot of reasons to be skeptical. And whenever somebody's trying to force you into something, usually it makes you go, I don't trust this. So, but this person going on and on and on about using a blow dart, it's like every question seemed to like kind of end in him making that little joke. And I think he was being flirtatious and charmingly funny to the person that he was sitting with. I don't know exactly what his motive was in it, but the video really does paint a pretty nasty picture about some of the people that work for the FDA. And if that type of mentality is bred in other people, what do we do whenever that type of person reaches a higher degree of power, and authority, influence? It's a joke to him. He was going to go door to door to stick people and tell them it's a vitamin C shot once, if we were allowed to do it, and then he's like, it does sound pretty Germany. So because of what he had to say. He's like, everybody should be on a list, and all this shit. And if that doesn't scare you, we started with propaganda and the atrocities of World War II through the German, through the Nazi Party and Hitler's rise to power, and we're ending on something that sounds eerily echoing the past. Now, this is not a push that's going away. This is something that's becoming more and more likely. We've already started the conversation, and not us, but the conversation has already been started about the supply and demand, the supply chain being disrupted, that we're going to have to start really gauging who lives and who doesn't, or who gets what care and who doesn't. This narrative that, supplies are limited and that we're not going to have much of a choice. And it's going to be a justification for obviously shielding, CDC shielding, and addressing who gets what kind of treatment when they're in the hospital or when they're in these camps. So they've started that conversation already. It's not going to go away. It's intended. It's strategic. I don't see us having that big of an issue. When you do hear about the hospitals being overrun, for everybody out there, when you hear about the hospitals being overrun, what they're typically talking about is the ER. ERs commonly get a high influx of individuals for multiple reasons. The ER is a small portion of the entire hospital. Yes, they get overrun regularly. If you're hearing that people are having ivermectin overdoses, the worst thing that it seems to happen when you have too much ivermectin is you can have temporary blindness because of it. Now, that's pretty much what they're coming up with, because it does seem to be such a very less lethal in high dosages type of medication that is used all over the world. So if you're going around going, well, that's a horse medication, you're ill-informed. You're uneducated on ivermectin. I'm not as the authority in ivermectin, but I will tell you, if you look into it, the WHO, the World Health Organization, that's on the essential medications for every country they go into. They plan to have that as part of the delivery, first response deliveries, because it's really good to help combat a lot of different parasites. And what it's used for is a very healthy use in these different countries. So it's not a horse medication. It just so happens that it's used for a horse anti-parasite medication. That's it. But that's not what it is intended for. That's just one of its many uses. And it's most available if you go to farm store stuff like that, because you can get it for horses. I don't suggest people do that because of the combination of the horse's size, the different dose values, and what's actually in it. It's made for the biology of a horse, not a human being, but it's still there. There's a lot of stuff, monoclonal antibodies. Now the federal government has taken over the distribution of that before it was up to the states to place their orders. Florida has been using that because it's incredibly effective. Basically, it's like the antibodies necessary to fight COVID, but they're not originating out of you, and they're giving you these antibodies through these treatments, and it's incredibly effective. And now they're making sure that Florida gets a restricted amount of those. And I can tell you that, in my opinion, it's so that they can make DeSantis look as bad as possible, so they can try to get him out of office for the next election. It's a complete political hit job, in my opinion. And if it doesn't piss you off, knowing that you're a citizen that can be affected by this, I don't know what's going to piss you off. It's the federal government's decision to do this. They say they need to distribute an equal and fair amount to all of the states in the country, so that they could restrict how many we can get in Texas and other states that really need it. Alabama supposedly also in pretty decent need for it. It's what they have, whatever they can do to make it that bad. If they were really worried about COVID, they would stop people coming in from the border. They just stop it, lock it down. You're coming in with a virus we're actively trying to combat, but they're not. They don't give a shit. They're bringing those people in, and those people have directions on which states to go to for specific reasons. If you ever watch any of them actually talking, they're talking to reporters that are coming through. So anyway, there's a lot to go on about. We can't go any further, unfortunately, for this episode. I've pretty much dominated it, so I apologize, Joshua.
No, it's all right.
Joshua.
We're learning together. That's
it. But we're happy to get back and actually have this episode again. This is incredibly cathartic for me. So I thank you, Joshua, for making sure that we found the time today, and that we were able to line this up. Is this something that, we do have people that really enjoy it. So with that, you like it, hit the like button, comment, share this video with people in your life you feel that are actually going to benefit from it, or you can start a dialogue with. Neither one of us are saying we're absolutely right, but we are saying we've at least looked into this stuff. We are saying that we have an informed opinion, but it doesn't mean that we can't be corrected if we're wrong. But if you think that you're going to come and correct us and tell us we're wrong because you learned something from the television, you're going to find out how quickly you're wrong about what you learned. I almost guarantee it, because that's just the nature of propaganda, Yeah. So with that, you have anything in for closing before we finish up?
No, just glad to be back. I know it was a long layoff. We're going to continue to cover all the stories that we talked about. All the topics we normally talk about aren't just like an end. Like as you see, if you watch the show regularly, you'll see that topics will come back. So if you liked a topic that we talked about previously that we haven't touched on in a while, leave it in the comments. Tell us what you want us to talk about. It's fun to get some, feedback from our subscribers and our viewers into what topics you enjoy us discussing. I know that we talked about sports sometimes, we talked about investing, we talk about politics, we talk about the media a lot, we talk about everything. So if there's something that we haven't talked about, leave it in the comments. And if there's something in this episode you enjoy that you want to hear more about, also leave that in the comments. We really want to get more feedback from our viewers, especially once we're on more of a track where we can get episodes out like we did previously. It's just been challenging with our schedules now. So have a great Sunday. Stay golden pony boy as always. And we'll catch you guys next week. We're going to try to get an episode next week out. It depends on what day. So we'll see you guys next week. That's for sure.
Yeah, I echo all of that. Thank you, Joshua. You're a hell of a co-host. Hell of one. Well, with that, remember, guys, gals, we are, all the patriots out there that actually followed us. We're in this together. So we're Americans. We need to act like it. Just because you disagree with somebody doesn't mean they're your enemy. Let's figure out how we have a distance between each other and come to an understanding. Dialogue is unbelievably important when we're being pushed apart for tribalism, especially through our government. We need to continue to bond together, or we are going to fall like all other socialist countries, because we're going to end up in that same boat. And you tell me which one of them are actually still holding strong. Now, if people think, oh, Denmark, well, we're going to be like Denmark. No, we're not. No, we're not. We're going to be like Venezuela. So let's not get there. Okay. Don't let your need to be right destroy your children's future. Okay.
That's true.
You want your future, you want your kids to have the same kind of future that you yourself grew up in, then you're going to have to stand for the Constitution. You're going to have to stand for a Bill of Rights. Otherwise, say goodbye to all of it. You're not going to have any of it. And then we're going to be just like Australia before you know it, then Venezuela after that.
Yep.
So with that, you guys, gals, cool cats, not the kittens, because you know what? We don't need to get Carol F. and Baskin involved with this. Corn Pop says hi. Sorry that he didn't get to jump in. And until next time, I am your host, Sir Chad Everett Brochures. Joshua, your Patriot, my Kraken McClendon co-host, and we'll see you guys on the next one. So.